I've lived on this land my whole life. It's a 108-year-old lake ranch that's been in my family for generations, quiet, peaceful, and far removed from the chaos of the city. So when I decided to dig a small pond near the edge of the property to help water livestock and maybe attract some wildlife, I didn't think twice. It was my land, my equipment, my business. But apparently, the HOA thought differently. It started with a knock on the door, some clipboard-wielding board member telling me I hadn't submitted a modification request. I reminded them my ranch existed long before the HOA was even formed. They didn't care. Within a week, I got a formal notice banning any unauthorized excavation on shared community land. Only my ranch isn't part of the community. It never was. That didn't stop them from threatening fines, reporting me to zoning, and even trespassing to take photos. They wanted control. And they thought they had it until they pushed too far. One morning, I found my access road blocked by cones and a temporary stop work order. That was the last straw. I didn't get mad, got even. You see, they forgot one thing. The main power junction for their entire block sits right on the edge of my land. So I made a few quiet calls. And that evening, as their lights flickered out one by one, I just sat on the porch with a cup of coffee waiting for what would come next. The power didn't go out all at once. It started with a few flickers, porch lights blinking, AC units stuttering. Then the whole block, about 20 newer homes across the hill, went dark. I didn't flip any switches or touch a thing. I just called in a maintenance crew to inspect the old utility post that, by the way, sits entirely on my side of the property line. That line had never been a problem before, but now it was suddenly at the center of a tug-of-war. A few hours later, flashlights and phone screens lit up across the HOA neighborhood. Folks were stepping outside, confused and frustrated. A couple of them tried to come down my road, but I had already locked the gate and posted a sign. Asterisk private property. No trespassing. Asterisk, I wasn't being dramatic. I was being patient. For months, the HOA had been trying to act like they had some kind of jurisdiction over my family's land, even though our ranch predates their neighborhood by well over a century. It started small. First, they sent letters about visual disruption from our old barn. Then they claimed my fence was too high. I ignored it. But then they blocked the pond, called the county, and treated my place like it was some kind of public park they could regulate. What they didn't realize was that while they were drawing up rules, I was quietly collecting every notice, email, and voice message they left. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. By the next morning, the HOA president, Greg, retired lawyer turned part-time tyrant, was at my gate, red in the face and waving a clipboard like it held the Constitution. He shouted something about infrastructure tampering and negligence, but I didn't say a word, just sipped my coffee and watched him through the fence. The irony. That utility post they all relied on had been marked for relocation for years, but nobody ever followed through. Not even after my family offered to help pay for it. They were happy to use what was on my land. Now, until I did something, they didn't. Like, that same day, I started hearing from neighbors, quietly. One left a note in my mailbox, thanking me for finally standing up to them. Another stopped me at the feed store and said he regretted signing the HOA agreement years ago. Turns out, I wasn't the only one they were targeting. One family got fined for having chickens. Another was told to repaint their shed because it was too rustic. My wife had had enough, too. She pulled out a dusty old map from the county archives showing the original property lines of the ranch, clearly drawn long before Greg's subdivision even existed. We made copies and mailed them out anonymously to every house in the HOA. If they wanted a war over control, they were about to realize they were standing on shaky ground. Literally. And just when I thought things couldn't get more tangled, a letter showed up from the power company. The letter from the power company was short, but it hit like a hammer. It stated that due to recent maintenance concerns and legal boundary questions, service to the utility pole on my property would be suspended until further notice. That meant the HOA block every home on that ridge would remain without power until someone sorted it out. And now, that someone was me. Phones started ringing. Emails rolled in. HOA members who had never spoken a word to me before were suddenly real polite, asking if we could talk things through. But I wasn't looking for apologies. I was looking for accountability. Greg, of course, went the opposite route. He filed a formal complaint with the county, accusing me of sabotage, claiming I had intentionally caused the blackout to retaliate. What he didn't know was that the power company had already documented the unsafe wiring on their side of the pole left, untouched by their own electricians for years. And that little detail put the blame squarely back on them. Meanwhile, word spread fast about those original land maps. Some homeowners were furious. They'd been paying fees and following rules based on Greg's claims, and now they weren't even sure if their homes were technically in HOA territory. The pressure was mounting. The power outage dragged into its third day. Tensions were high. My phone buzzed nonstop. And that's when I saw Ite notice taped to my gate. This time, it wasn't from the HOA. It was from a lawyer. The envelope on my gate wasn't some generic cease and desist. It was a full legal packet 20 pages deep with a letterhead from a law firm representing the HOA, according to them. I was being sued for willful disruption of essential services, emotional distress, and get this, interfering with neighborhood harmony. Couldn't help but laugh at that last part. They were the ones who trespassed, made threats, and tried to control land that never belonged to them. Now they were accusing me of ruining their peace. Here's where the twist hit. Buried in the documents was a claim that the HOA had quietly filed an application months ago to redraw the neighborhood boundary lines, and they listed my ranch as part of their extended jurisdiction. No one had told me. No vote had happened. They just tried to sneak it through the county, banking on the hope that no one would notice. And somehow, the paperwork had been sitting in limbo, waiting on a single inspection before it could be approved. So that's what this was all really about. They didn't want to stop a pond. They wanted my land, my historic lakefront ranch too, fall under their control. More dues, more rules, and more leverage. I stood on my porch that evening, staring at the sun dipping behind the lake, realizing just how far they were willing to go. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. They were playing a long game. But they didn't realize I just started mine. And I had something they didn't. Proof. The next morning, I loaded up every document I had: original land maps, power, company reports, HOA letters, and that boundary application, and drove straight to the county office. I didn't ask for an appointment. I walked in, calm but firm, and asked to speak with the land records supervisor. She took one look at the packet, especially the historic deed signed by my great-grandfather in the 1800s, and her eyes widened. "This land's never been under HOA jurisdiction," she said. "Not then, not now." Turns out, the HOA had filed their boundary extension using outdated survey data and never disclosed that my property had its own separate zoning and utility agreements. Records that had been digitally archived but rarely checked. Within the hour, she marked the application as void. Just like that. The HOA's attempt to absorb my ranch into their control was officially dead. The county sent a notice to the HOA's law firm that same afternoon. The lawsuit dismissed before it even reached a courtroom. The power company restored full service by evening, but with new conditions. Any future maintenance or upgrades would require my permission in writing. Control had shifted. That night, I sat on my porch again. Same coffee cup, same view. But this time, the silence was mine. just as I thought things were finally settled. My wife walked out holding a small envelope that had just arrived. It was a letter from a new developer, asking if I'd be open to selling the land. I opened the envelope and read the letter twice. The developer was offering a huge sum more money than I'd ever seen to buy the entire ranch for a future lakefront subdivision, said they'd heard about the recent jurisdictional dispute and thought I might be ready to move on. I folded the letter up and slid it into the drawer next to the old family deeds. My answer was simple: not for sale. This land wasn't just property, it was family history, hard work, and peace earned the long way. It had weathered storms, fed generations, and now stood firm against an HOA that thought power came from paper. They tried everything: rules, threats, even lawsuits, but in the end, they underestimated the one thing they couldn't touch: the truth. After the dust settled, few neighbors came by with pies and handshakes. Turns out many of them didn't support the HOA's actions, but felt pressured to stay quiet. Greg stepped down from the board a week later, and last I heard, the HOA was rewriting their bylaws with actual homeowner input this time. The pond? It's nearly finished now. Birds already gathered there at dawn, and the cattle love it. My wife says it's the prettiest corner of the ranch. I think she's right.